If you thought that streaming would put an end to the era of blackouts, you would be sorely mistaken. For the last two and a half weeks now, Roku and Google have been negotiating a new deal, and things got ugly 2 weeks ago, really. Roku removed YouTube TV from its marketplace. As of today, YouTube TV remains on your Roku if you've downloaded it and you have an account, obviously. If you have it on your Roku account, it remains on there. Fun fact, and this was not the case last week, though. Roku is pissed now because Google went ahead and made a little out route. So if you have a Roku and you have YouTube, if you have the YouTube app, you can access YouTube TV now through the YouTube app. And Roku is definitely not happy about that because that steals away some of their leverage now. But that didn't happen last week. I just saw that this morning. That is now available. But anyway, this whole deal that Roku and Google have been going back and forth, Roku has said that it's really both parties. It's not about money. The first instinct you think is a deal or some monetary deal. It's really not about that between these two companies. Roku has said that Google wants preferential treatment for its YouTube and YouTube TV apps. They've said that Roku has said that the company, Google, has cited 4 demands that it felt were anti-competitive and could violate antitrust laws. Apparently, it has to do with consumer search results that grant Google access to user data or something of that nature. There's not really any concretion on what these demands actually are, but Roku has gone as far as to say that they believe Google would violate antitrust laws, which is big now because, as I said last week, if this goes somewhere and they actually want to take this to court, Roku, this could set a big precedent for antitrust laws in streaming, because that's the hairy part. It's different when you're dealing with cable networks and stuff like that and running the risk of monopoly or overstepping or overreach. But it's different when it's over the top, which is what which is what YouTube TV ultimately is. For those who don't know, YouTube TV, it's got 3 million subscribers at the moment. And I think you were kind of confused on it last week, what exactly it is. It's not like a Paramount Plus thing. It's not a content hub so much as it basically is it's a cable alternative. Mm-hmm. It's a cable alternative. It comes with, I think, 65 channels. I think that's the bare basic. And a lot of lifestyle channels and stuff like that. You're basically paying monthly. I think it's about $50 a month for a little bit more than basic cable. And it's great. It's a really good service. It's got cloud DVR. I love it. I love YouTube TV. It's probably my second most used app behind YouTube itself. I find it wonderful in a lot of different ways. But apparently also Google is also trying to leverage power and force Roku to accept hardware requirements with this new deal that would up consumer cost. Roku hasn't asked for $1 of financial consideration for Google either, which was an important note in the Hollywood Reporter, I believe, last week. But Roku's got a strong grip on this market, and YouTube TV, relatively speaking, doesn't have a lot of subscribers in 3 million. So it's going to be interesting. Roku's not afraid to fight. We've been talking about this since Sleepless was revived. They're not afraid to fight between Warner and beefing with HBO Max, between NBC Universal and beefing with Peacock. This is not a company that's afraid of blacking out channels. So I'm very interested. I'm keeping my thumb on the pulse of this story and when YouTube TV could be back on the marketplace. But for now, at the making of this episode, at the making of this video, if you have YouTube TV installed on your Roku, you can still access it. If you don't, you're screwed at the moment unless you access it through the YouTube app.
Yeah. Looking at this story at first, I was like, oh, it's just billion dollar companies, fighting,
that's what you think.
Petty little squabbles. But honestly, you get a little deeper into the story, specifically what Roku is citing. Roku is, out of all the things, of all the silly reasons for billionaire companies to sue billionaire companies or whatever, right? This one, I think, actually holds some of the more water than most, quite a bit too, because Roku's apparently specifically citing, as you mentioned, Steve, it's manipulation of search results. And yeah, I cannot understate that when you think search, you think Google, and there is a case for that. That is the de facto standard. to the point where maybe you could start ruling it de jure. I don't know what a judge would say in that regards. I don't know what angle the lawyers might take, but just broadly barking up that angle, these days tech is sweating balls, dude. Like Facebook, I was gonna say Instagram, that's also Facebook, but like, Facebook, Twitter, Google, they are all sweating because they're sweating in their, $1 million Armani suits and, going to the spa afterwards, whatever. But, they're getting a little nervous because, everyone's attention these days, people weren't talking about it 10 years ago when people were really sounding the alarm bells, but now it's come, the hen is it's getting a little closer to roost. These days, on the right, and I'm not going to get into the right and left, but on the right, people are decrying big tech and getting all antsy about censorship or whatever you lie on that. And what I'm just saying is that they're on it. They're on the issue of just general tech issues and the manipulation that big tech, however you take that phrase, is on it. Meanwhile, on the left, a lot of privacy issues, a lot of issues with exposure of private data, and a lot of iffiness on billionaire companies just kind of freely taking and monopolizing and monetizing people's what you would think would be someone's personal private data, even though it's on the books. That's where people's principles lie. So all over the political spectrum, people are starting to really pay attention to this stuff. And people are saying FCC, honestly, the FEC it might get involved here with anti-monopoly stuff. Who knows which side of the aisle will take on this? And it doesn't really matter on how we talk about it, but really just the fact that the all guns are looking at tech right now, and how Roku was able to potentially manipulate that if this story gets bigger. Oh boy, Roku's smart here, man. In this particular instance, if what they're citing is very interesting.
We're going to keep our thumb on the pulse of this story, as I said earlier, because I'm fascinated by it as somebody who has YouTube TV too. This affects me, and a Roku. Like I said, I feel like growing up with DirecTV, and I think I mentioned this last week, growing up with DirecTV, it was the same thing. As a kid, there was nothing more frustrating, and this happened like once every couple of years. Whenever DirecTV would fight with Viacom, as a kid, it would piss me off tremendously because DirecTV would block out all the Viacom channels. Now, as a kid, it's your whole damn world. It's MTV. It's Nickelodeon. They own everything. It's BET. It's everything fun is owned by Viacom. And, and then I remember one time DirecTV was fighting with WGN, big network out here. They were fighting with WGN. We didn't have WGN for a good 6-7 months. CBS they fought with at one point. 7 months, I believe. Look it up. When they fought with WGN, man, they wouldn't cave at all. And then it was wonderful, too, because then I'd go to, like, WGN at a friend's house, or I'd be at a friend's house, and they'd have Channel 9 on for the Hawk game or something. And then they'd be running commercials saying, like, DirecTV customers cannot see WGN because of their unfair, unethical practices or whatever. And I'm like, oh, it's just a pissing match now. But, like, growing up with DirecTV, I'm not, I've always remembered, like, cable blackouts being a huge thing. And now getting Roku, it's like, oh, well, Roku's playing the DirecTV card now, aren't they? They're not afraid to beef with anybody. They're not afraid to black out any kind of app or anything like that between HBO Max and Peacock and all this now. Now YouTube TV is under scrutiny at least, or at least not available on Roku if you don't already have it. We'll keep tabs on this story. I'm interested to see where it goes. The real question is going to be, if it doesn't get resolved, is that word anti-competitive going to keep getting thrown out? And is that going to go somewhere?